Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and welcome to a very special tutorial. In this video series, we are going to be covering how to water bend using Bifrost. And as a special surprise, I am honored that this video series is being sponsored by Autodesk. Autodesk is the creators of Maya, and I absolutely love Maya, so I'm very excited that they're sponsoring me for the next 3 videos. This is very exciting also because it encourages me to produce even better content for you. You can find more information below. That being said, let's go ahead and get started in water bending. So here is my character. As you might have known her before, she is Calico and she already has an animation. So if I click on play, you'll see that she's got this little sphere. She's rotating it around and she looks like she's casting some sort of magic. Now, if you guys don't know how to quickly animate your character, you guys can take a look at the link provided above and also below, where I show how to quickly animate your character using Mixamo. All right, as for the sphere, it is in fact parented. If I select this sphere and you guys take a look at the attributes, you'll notice that it's blue. That means that it's got a constraint. So the constraint is attached to her wrist, and therefore wherever her wrist moves, the sphere will follow. So it makes it look like it's really magical, but really it's just following her wrist. All right, so that is the scene setup. The next thing I want to show you guys is how to create water bending. So I'm going to start off with a helix. So under create, let's go to create polygon primitives and let's start with a helix. And here's my helix and I'm going to move it to the side and lift. Over here on the inputs on the right, we have a couple of coils. We also have height. So I'm going to increase my height. I am going to increase the width. And finally, I'm going to decrease the radius. Now this is supposed to wrap around my character, so I am going to place this helix around my character, like so. And I'm probably going to make it a little bit larger just so that it wraps around my character a little bit more. Let's go with the height. Let me shrink the height a little bit. And I think that is pretty good. All right, with that helix in place. So let's go to edges, right-click edge, double-click on one of the lines. That's going to go all the way along the edge of the helix. And then up here at the top, we are going to go to curves and we are going to go duplicate surface curves. Now what that's going to do is that for every single edge that we have, and now that I'm done with this, I can actually delete it. It's going to create one tiny little curve. So every edge has a curve. Now, of course, that's not going to help us because we actually want a complete curve. So let's select all of these curves, dang, all 150 of them. And we're going to go to curves and attach. Curves, attach, which is going to give us one curve, which is great. I'm going to delete the history, freeze the transformations, center the pivot. And now all these extra curves, all 150 of them, can now go away. And now I have one fancy curve. Now again, if you want to, you can kind of move it around so that this curve is actually, in place. And then I'm going to shape it. Now the idea is that I want a sphere or an object that's going to follow this curve. But I also don't want it to be a perfect helix. I want it to have a little bit rise and fall. So I'm going to right click and go to control vertices, and you can see there's a lot of them. So if you want less, you can go to curves, rebuild, and go to the options. And here I can kind of tell it how many curves that I want. So let's say 11. So when I click on this, you're going to see that now I have only 11. Now that seems a little low, so I'm going to undo that and just kind of make 25. I still keep the shape of the helix, but now I have a lot less to work with, which makes my life easier. So now I'm going to make this rise and fall. So it's going to kind of sink down, then go up. I can bring this up a little bit. You might want to bring this out a little bit. I'm just kind of playing around. So again, the purpose of just editing this is so that when you guys are having something animate, it looks a little bit less than a perfect straight line. This will actually look like it's rising and falling, and therefore looks a little bit more magical and organic. So I'm just kind of clicking around, something a little bit like so. Cool. Let me just double check that her feet. Okay, good. I just want to make sure everything's looking good. All right, great. Now that that's done, let's label this. This is going to be my motion curve. And since we've come so far, let's save. All right, next we need something for the fluid to follow. So right now I have a curve. You can use actually any piece of geometry. You can use a circle, you can use a cylinder, you can use all sorts of stuff. Because she is like a magical cat girl, because she is in fact, calico, and her whole thing is about cats. As you can see by her clothes, she's got paws, she's got cat stockings. So it's important to kind of keep that theme going. So this is going to be water bending feline thing. Let's go to Windows, General Editors, Content Browser, and in here you're going to find several default meshes. Very low poly, very little detail, but this is going to get me enough information to make it look like a cat. So if you don't see it, this is make sure that you are under Modeling, Sculpting Meshes, under Animals, and then in here you're going to see a cat, which I'm going to drag into the scene. And it is a massive cat. Now, the reality is that my character is actually really small. All of these are centimeters, so this is probably, bigger than it seems. But let's go ahead and grab some faces. And I'm going to just select these heads here. I can isolate select to make sure I grab the whole head. Okay, good. And then what I'm going to do is hold down Shift, select everything else, which will deselect the ones that I had. Delete those, and now I just have a cat head. Let's center that pivot. I'm going to scale it down, bring it in. And I'm going to go to Edges, double click the edges, the outer edges. So these guys, double click. And then under Mesh, fill hole. So that's going to fill that hole. Now you can push this a little bit more when it comes to the modeling. So for example, I might want to, I'm clicking on the letter B, which gives me soft select, and then B, middle mouse and drag to get a little bit of control over my fall off. But if you're interested in kind of editing this so that it looks more like a cat, you can. Don't forget to turn on symmetry. Right, so I can just make these ears maybe a little bit longer if you want. And when you're happy with the results, you have a kitty cat head. I'm gonna scale this down a little bit. And I'm going to snap it at the bottom of the curve. And if you hold down C, middle mouse, and drag. So I'm not clicking or anything, I'm just holding down C, middle mouse, and dragging, and that will snap it to the curve. See how it kind of follows the curve? It's kind of neat. It's a little shortcut that helps you snap into place. All right, let me delete that history, freeze the transformation, and just call this cat Geo. Labeling is important. And then what we're going to do is called a motion path. So I'm going to select the model, I'm going to shift select the curve, and I'm going to show you another trick. If you know what it's called, but you don't remember where it's located, you can go to Help, Find Menu. And I know this is called a motion path. So I'm going to click on Motion. And it will give you all of the options of how to, different types of motions. Like, okay, this one's a motion library. This is a motion trail. And that's exactly what I want. So what I'm looking for is an animation. And you can see that there's a constraint motion path attached to motion path. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. There's also under rigging motion path attached to motion path, right? So I'm going to be doing animation. So over here to the top, I'm going to change this to animation. And under constraint, there's motion path attached to motion path. And you'll see that the cat head will now attach to the curve. And there's animation. So it starts off at 1 and all the way to 120. There is an animation and it goes like this. Now, don't get me wrong, the head is facing the wrong way and it's really funny. But the idea is that the head is actually attached to the curve now. All right, so I'm going to open up the attributes of the cat and you're looking for the tab called Motion Path. And you'll notice that there's a couple of things we can change. One is the front axis. Do you want the front axis to be at X? Well, you can kind of change it to Y or you can change it to Z. And you'll notice that with Z, it's facing the curve. So as you see, the cat is now facing the Z, which means that it's now facing the curve, and that's exactly what I want. So if I press play, you're going to see the cat goes up and up fairly fast, and then it kind of slows down at the end. You'll also notice that over here, it's yellow. So just keep that in mind also that this is considered a constraint, so you can't animate it. So I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller because it's going to hold a lot of fluid. And now that we have our scene set up, we now are ready to start waterbending. Now I already have a dome light and I'll be able to render. So keep that in mind that if you want to, you can always go to Arnold Lights Physical Sky to just get a basic lighting setup. And what we're going to do first is select our cat head. Under effects, I'm going to go to Bifrost, and this is going to turn into a liquid. And what happens is that we're going to get this little box. This box is the liquid. Now over here to the left, you're going to see a bunch of new nodes. One of them is the Bifrost liquid, and then we actually have the liquid itself. And we also have a bunch of properties, plush mesh, and so on and so forth. So we're going to be using this to be able to manipulate our liquid. So I'm going to rewind. And I am going to hit play. And what we're going to see is a bunch of particles and they fall. There it is. That's our liquid right there. Doesn't look like much, but we definitely wanted to remain attached to our character. And we also wanted to continuously make fluid. So I'm going to rewind, open up the attributes, Control A. Let's grab the liquid. And one of the things that I like to do first is increase the point size. So I'm going to increase it to about 2.5 just so that I can see the points a little bit better. So if I rewind and if I hit the cat geo, you'll see that there are the points that are a little bit easier to see. Shift H to bring the cat head back. The first thing we want to do is tell it to continuously emit particles. So as you can see if I select the Bifrost emitter props, there's something called continuous emission. So click on that and I'm going to rewind and press play, and you're going to see that the particles are being created. Now you can also see that it's raining particles. So that's always really funny, but you can see that things are in fact pouring. Just out of morbid curiosity, I am going to render. So let me go ahead and pause because it eats up my CPU. So let me pause and I'll be right back with the render. And you can see that there's a little bit of fluid following the cat. It's not enough, but at least we're getting kind of like the look of it. Okay. So next, let me close some of these things. Next, let's take a look at the gravity. So when we look at the liquid properties, you can see that we do have a gravity. I'm going to change that to 0 because what I want is for the particles to remain following this path. Now there's still going to be energy going through this because of the motion, but I don't want gravity to have a big impact on this. So let's go ahead and press play and see what that looks like. And you'll notice that there's still a lot of force, so the water is really starting to splash outside of the circle. Now, this white particles that you see here is not foam, just a visual representation of energy. So down here at the bottom, it has less energy, and up here at the top has a lot of energy. So I'm just curious how it's going to render, so let's take a look. So you can see that it's falling along even though it's got a lot of particles, we don't really have that many particles that's actually rendering. But you can see that the water is in fact going along. So that's kind of fun. Next, we want to reduce the spread. There's a lot of energy here because this little cat head is whipping around. So we definitely want to reduce the energy. And by the way, I'm going to go here and turn off the symmetry before I forget. So we want to reduce the energy of this object. So one way we can do this is through the transport time cycle. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce this by half, and then we can see the effect. Rewind, press play. So you'll notice that the particles basically have less energy. It doesn't flow as far as before because we're in frame 62 now and it's getting to this point. So it reduces the amount of speed it has. So I'm going to keep reducing this to maybe a 0.3, rewind, and then press play. All right, I'm getting to around 62. You can see that the energy is a lot less and the particles are moving on. And you can also see that the continuously pouring particles. Okay, I'm going to render just. All right, so it's pretty neat because you're getting these nice little chunks, probably too chunky and it's not really accurate, but I like the look of the water and the way it's flowing. Everything's a little bit too even. So what I'm going to do is animate the scale of the cat head. So around 15, I want the scale to be around here. So I'm going to select scale, right click and do key selected. Then I'm going to move up the curve to around 40 and maybe I want this to be slightly larger. and key selected, maybe just a little bit bigger. Key selected, go on to about 60, and maybe I'll just make this one really small. Key selected, move on to around 85, make this one bigger again. Key selected, and then finally all the way to 120, which I will probably scale small, and then key selected. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So you'll notice that as it goes up the frame, there's a lot more particles when it's bigger and significantly less particles when it's smaller. So it's going to give us a nice breakup of the particle emissions. All right, so I still feel like the liquid has a little too much energy. So let's take a look at the properties. And let's change the transport timescale to about 0.1. Let's rewind and play, and let's take a look. So I'm definitely liking that a lot better. It's definitely more attached to the curve. And there's still some energy pulling the water away, but at least it's now working. Gonna let that run through. And then I'm gonna stop it and see what that looks like with a render. All right, this is what we have so far. We have the curve. The water is following the curve. It's following the shape of the cat, and it's emitting particles based on the speed, the size of the cat, and everything else, and of course the energy. So it's looking really good. Let's make this look even better. So right now the water is very, very chunky, and I really want to make sure that it looks better. Now, right now we're seeing particles, and it's really hard to see what the shape looks like. So let's go to our liquid. We're going to scroll down, open up Bifrost meshing, and turn on enable. This is going to give us an idea of what the geometry looks like when it's following this particle. Now, if I select it, you're going to think, well, that's a lot of mesh. It's not. We definitely want to make sure that it looks a lot more accurate. Another thing you might want to do is also hide the liquid particles. We don't need it to simulate twice. We just need it to simulate once. So I'm going to go ahead, select the liquid, and do a Control H, which is going to hide the particles, but the mesh is still being rendered. Another thing that I want to avoid is you'll notice that once the particles hit down here, you really don't get to see them anymore. So I want to create what's called a kill plane. So what a kill plane means is that if a particle passes this kill plane, it'll get rid of the particle. It no longer renders it. And I think that's going to be important because anything underneath this plane, we don't really see. So why render it? So select your liquid. Let's go to Bifrost Fluids and choose kill plane. And it creates this plane. Now it basically kills anything beyond all directions, but I just like to increase it to make me feel better. All right, so now that I have this, the next thing I want to do is select my liquid properties. And what I need to do to get a much more accurate look in water is decrease my master voxel size. Now, right now it is at half, but I'm going to go ahead and change this to like a 0.2. This is going to give me significantly more voxels, which is basically almost like pixels, but for fluids. It's important because I want to make sure my water looks as realistic as possible. So go ahead and change your master voxels by 0.2. Now, when I do that though, my particles and everything is going to increase. Now, we don't see them right now, but I am going to make it into a habit of just reducing my point size to about a 1. So now I'm going to rewind and press play, and let's see it's going to take a little bit longer. But the quality of the water is going to be significantly higher. There it is. The water is following along the path. It is getting bigger and smaller as it goes through. And you can see that it's getting pretty close to the curve, but it still has energy where it starts to disappear. We're still getting some nice, diverse water simulation. Over here, it's going to start disappearing because they don't render underneath the plane because thanks to the kill plane. Again, I'm trying to make this as efficient as possible so that when I am rendering or even simulating, it's as efficient as possible. Now, the reason why I am exporting, I changed it from particles to mesh, is because I am going to be showing you guys how to export this as a mesh so that you can bring it into a different 3D Maya file and not worry about simulating every single time. So this is a jam-packed video tutorial, so hopefully you guys are enjoying it as much as I am. I'm going to wait until it hits around 115. 110, 115, so then I can show you what it looks like. I'm gonna go ahead, press stop. Okay, I changed my mind, 100. And let's see what it looks like with a... And this is what it looks like so far. Pretty cool. Let me take a snapshot of that. So much fun to see how the water per fractions work. So I'm gonna rotate this. Hopefully we're getting some really nice shaping of the water and we're getting some nice effects. And let me just get a better render here. I'm going to turn on my resolution gauge just so I can get kind of like a cooler angle here. And if you want to, you guys can create a camera. So I'm going to go under create camera. I'm going to go to panels, look through selected. And I'm going to pick a cool looking shot here. And over here in the focal length, you guys are more than welcome to change some of the focal length. So if I drop it, it just increases. I can kind of fit a little bit more into the scene. And then I can render. All right, so there you go. We now have some water bending going on here. Feel free to play around with more of the liquid and also the curves and everything. But in general, I like the way things are moving. And that is the introduction to Bifrost water bending. In the next video tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to control a little bit more of the water so you can have a different shapes and different appearance of water, because right now it's a little chunky and I want to show you guys how to add a little bit more information to the particles. And in the next video, I'm also going to show you guys how to export this so that it's a mesh, and then you can import it in, well, just, import it in any Maya scene. And furthermore, I'm also going to light render this whole scene so that you guys can take a look at it. That is going to be the video series. Hopefully you found this helpful. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That is your message to me saying that you guys like my videos and that you want to see more. And of course, it helps if you guys click on that little bell so that you don't miss any of my future videos. If you think that somebody would like to see this, or do you feel like somebody could learn a little bit more about Bifrost and make their pieces stand out even further, please share my videos. That would be amazing if you could share it with anybody, your friends, your peers, your instructors. Feel free to share my videos. That would be amazing. One final message, please take a look at academicphoenixplus.com where you can find free downloads, free ebooks, free trainings, and so much more. So take a look at academicphoenixplus.com and also sign up for my newsletter to find out more about what's going on with me and my channel and my tutorials. So again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here with me. Thank you again. Keep creating, and I will see you next time.